All right, guys, we got a couple late stragglers coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I have a feeling some folks will be trickling in too. We have Dr. Warner's, I think, on her way, so hopefully she'll get here at some point. Happy Wednesday, made it to Hump Day, just all downhill for the rest of the week, unless you have to work tomorrow and Friday. Otherwise, it's downhill. I am Joey Longoria, Executive Director of the National Center for Sports Safety. And just real quick, our mission is really simple. We exist to make sure that kids have a safer experience on the playing field. And that is from age 4 through age 18. And we do that primarily through education. The folder that everybody got has prepared on it. That's the course that we teach. It's a 8-module course for high school coaches, 7-module course for coaches that teach at the park and rec level, volunteer coaches. So we do education. We also do AED placement at facilities for automatic external defibrillators to help with sudden cardiac arrest. We do that as well. And then we do events like this. From here up to, we did some in South Carolina last year, up in Pennsylvania, and we're in about 32 states at the moment, and teach our Prepare Safety course in all those states. Tonight is going to be a little bit different. This event really started formulating about 3 months ago. Michael, who's over here, who's our Director of Operations, he and I and one of our trainers were heading up to Nashville to go speak up there, and he's a high school trainer at Gardendale, was going up there with us, and his name was Mike, and I said, Mike, what is one of the things that you deal with most with your high school kids and with your youth athletes? And he said, you wouldn't believe how much bad nutrition information these kids bring into school that they get off the internet. It's really bad, and it's something I wish you guys would do and talk about more. So that's how this started. And putting together a panel of some really qualified folks that had a lot of information and some personal stories to share, kind of came together, and they all were able to do it on the same day. So that's how we're here. So what I'm going to do real quick, first of all, if anybody gets the urge and has to go to the restroom, they are the back. Just kind of go down the hallway. They're all kind of right there. But I'm going to just introduce everybody. I'm going to start closest to me, Rachel Davis. Got her undergrad at UAB in exercise physiology, master's in nutrition sciences. Currently is in the PhD program at UAB in nutrition sciences, Division I track and cross country at UAB. And for those who run, was the 36th overall female at the Boston Marathon this past year. So yeah, it's pretty wild, right? I didn't mean to skip. She was walking in right as I was talking. Dr. Amy Warner is an endocrinologist at UAB and associate professor, and specializes in diabetes, metabolism, and obesity. So happy to have her here as well. Next is Megan Gilbert. I always feel like I should be sipping coffee at a French bistro when I say her name, or eating Cajun food in New Orleans, one of the two. She had her master's in sports psychology. She is with the Mind Side here in Birmingham and does mental skills training for coaches and athletes. Also a former softball player and competitive cheer. Next is Lauren Floyd. Sanford has her bachelor's in English and philosophy, so don't get into an argument with her, because she probably is either smarter than you or will use really big words and you won't understand her. So don't argue with her. She is a certified personal trainer, certified run coach, also ran Division I track and cross country at Sanford. Also ran the Boston Marathon this past year, was only her second marathon in the 3:14. So pretty awesome athletes we have up here. Speaking of, next is Elizabeth Lassiter, who went to the Johns Hopkins University and got her degree in writing and art history, where she fell in love with food and decided she wanted to start writing about food. So what's the natural thing to do is you get a job writing about food, right? Not quite. She actually went and got her culinary degree at Lay Academy de Cuisine, so she's also a professional chef. So now she knows how to write about food, which she does for Time to Eat here in town, does articles for Cooking Life and Food and Wine magazine. And last but not least, we have the guys just bookended, so we just put the really ugly guys on the ends. Brandon Booth, master's in nutrition. He's a registered dietitian, personal trainer, part owner of Helena Health Club here in town. He is the founder of Benchmark Nutrition, and he specializes in performance nutrition at all levels, from young kids up through professionals. So I just realized, I don't know if you've ever been in front of a group with 6 other people and realized that you're the 7th smartest person, but I have the microphone and I have the questions, so I get to even things out just a little bit. We're going to get started. What we're going to do, we have 4 topics really that we're going to cover. It's going to start with how fuel impacts performance. And what I thought we would do is, after each one of those topics, is I can go out with my microphone and give 2 or 3 folks that are in the audience a chance to ask a question, about that topic, to somebody specific on the panel or just the panel in general. And then what we'll do at the end is, however much time we have left, which we can take as much time as we want, but about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A from the audience, just asking anything, whether it's general or specific, that you want to know about nutrition. So, y'all ready? You guys ready?
Yes, sir.
That is, you're my favorite kid already. All right, so we're going to get going on how fuel impacts performance, and this was, the reason these 4 topics are what we're going to talk about is because I picked things that, when I talked to them individually, pretty much every one of them talked about these 4 things quite a bit, and I think to understand some of the things you need to do to fuel while you're trying to perform at your best is understanding some of the bad habits that kids, adults. I know a lot of runners in the crowd. A lot of us have not great habits when it comes to fueling. So Megan, I'm going to pick on you first, because I was talking to Megan yesterday and she was telling me about a high school volleyball team that she had gone to talk to. And several of these girls had not eaten breakfast. Some of them had eaten less than half of their lunch. It's now 4 p.m. They're getting ready to work out for 3 hours and expecting to perform at a high level so that they can perform the next day at their game at a high level. So, Megan, I'm just going to kind of let you go with that.
Yeah, you told my story. I'm just kidding. So basically what we do when we work with athletes is we focus on how can we mentally and emotionally prepare to optimize and improve performance. So I'll work individually with some, I'll go and do team workshops, and it just so happened that that's where I was headed that afternoon. And I'd worked with this team before and had some really good, response rates and things like that. And I'd get there, and we had gone through an entire probably 45-minute workshop, and I try to keep them moving because, for most people, if you're sitting there listening to somebody talk, it's not going to happen. You're going to fall asleep, you're not going to be fully paying attention, and so I had them moving around, and we were talking about the things that we wanted to apply both mentally and physically at the game the next day, and I noticed that there was a lack of energy in the room. Now, that could 100% have been me, but I wanted to believe that it was not. So I just pushed through it, and they were fine, and we kind of did a few things off script that brought the energy up after that. But then I'm talking to the coach when they're warming up for practice, and he made the comment that one of the girls came up to him and asked, can I go, do you have a snack? Do you have anything left from lunch? I didn't bring anything to eat. And so at that point, he stopped the entire warm-up and asked them, how many of you have eaten a snack since after lunch? And there were maybe two or three of them who had actually raised their hands. So they hadn't eaten, what we came to find out was that several had not eaten breakfast. A handful of them had eaten maybe a third of their lunch. And then after that, most of them weren't eating a snack or anything before that. And then we've got 3 hours of, yes, workouts, yes, practice, that's both, on my end, mentally draining and mentally distracting and really requires a lot of focus. But on, these guys, and for the physical piece as well, they weren't really well prepared. And it's really interesting because that's just been one of the more recent stories that I could say. I've had golfers who have gone through high school, female golfers, long time we spend out on the course at that age, who have gone through an entire round and eaten a handful of Cheez-Its. I've had swimmers who have completely changed their diet because they felt like they either didn't have enough energy or had too much and they felt slow in the water. And so the things that they were doing to fuel or lack of fueling their body was impacting our ability to get them to improve on what they were doing mentally and psychologically. And those are just a handful of the stories of kind of bad habits that we've had to work on just from a mental aspect that has affected their performance. When they're trying to really improve performance, it's actually impeding them and holding them back from that.
So on the things that we can do to combat some of that, Rachel, Brandon, I'll kind of put you guys on the seat because I know Sunday, Rachel, you and I were talking and we were just kind of catching up through the weekend about the week and what was coming up in the week ahead, and you said, I have no idea what I'm cooking for dinner tonight, but I've had the crock pot going all day, and I know what we're eating for lunch all week. And so unpack that a little bit for us and just what some of the things, on what Megan said, but what can we do to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we're 4 p.m. at the end of the day and we have no fuel?
So a really big part of it is going to be planning ahead. So for athletes, when I was in college, it was the same thing. A lot of my teammates, we would have sprint practice at 3 o'clock in the heat of the day, and they weren't eating, hadn't eaten since breakfast or didn't eat breakfast and barely ate lunch. And, I've just always I've always been a planner. So I think the planning ahead and packing things, preparing for the week, Sunday, we were thinking, okay, my husband over here, we were like, what are we going to eat all week? We're really busy, we're gone all day. But it's really finding out what works for the individual, parents, for kids, college athletes, all of us at work all day, every day. I think finding a planning system that works can be extremely beneficial. And then thinking ahead on, well, what do I have going on this week? Or what do I have going on at this specific time of the day? When am I going to be able to eat? And then many of us are thinking about we're thinking more about when are we going to be able to work out. A lot of us in the room, it's when am I going to get my run in? So in thinking about those things, none of that happens effectively if we haven't thought about the fuel side. So I think thinking about what am I going to have for breakfast? When am I going to be eating next? Can I make it to lunch depending on what I'm eating, or do I need to pack an extra snack? Am I not going to be home until dinner and I haven't eaten for 7 hours and I'm exhausted? It's really just that personal planning, figuring out what works. Sometimes I even write things down just to make sure that I'm eating enough throughout the day, say after a big workout, or he's in class in the evening, I'm giving a lecture or something, and we're not going to meet at home until 8 o'clock. Well, we both have to pack food the whole day. So I think it's really important for professionals, students, all athletes to consider, parents for kids, because it was the same thing, when I was in high school, middle school. I think my mom just kind of always did this for me. She would pack my lunch, but she would pack the snacks that I would have periodically throughout the day up until track practice, and then I wouldn't get home until after 6, but I had everything kind of planned out. So developing that habit it's huge. Whatever can get you to develop the habit, because for some people it's really difficult. We're thinking about so many different things in our lives, work, school, kids, working out, everything. There's so much going on, so finding out what works for you individually, for your family, with your exercise regimen, or for your kids. I think finding that plan and then really trying to develop that habit is extremely beneficial.
That's great. Brandon, I want you to jump in whenever you want to, but I was thinking when she was talking about that, Lauren, I know you start seeing some clients at the gym at 6 a.m. and you see some as late as 6:30 p.m. So you're there, 12, 13, sometimes 14 hours. Sometimes you get clients that cancel and you can go get your run in. I mean, you're doing all this at the same time, your marathon training or half marathon training. What are things that you do that you found that can help?
Just like food hacks.
Just getting, food hacks, just to make sure you have enough fuel to get that run in the afternoon or whenever you can.
I think for me, like my general rules of thumb are, I never want to get super full because then I'm going to be lethargic and not be on the ball to talk one-on-one with my clients or give them proper cues. But I also need to be keeping myself, energetic throughout the day, which can be tough if you're constantly demoing different exercises. But I will say for me, it's always about some texture. It's always about like the right amount of satisfaction. I like things that are sort of kind of like in like a little small container. So in the mornings, usually, like staples for me are yogurt with oatmeal, honey, like unsweetened yogurt with some honey, just to keep my blood sugar levels good. I love just like the little baby bell cheeses with like a handful of almonds, things like that. Like for me, it's little units. But I still always have like meals too, so I do not graze. That's just for me though. Again, going back to what works for certain people, and that's very individual, that's very specific, that's where you go to the experts for that. But then there's also just some like common sense rules of thumb. Like don't expect a Coca-Cola and a Snickers bar, I don't care what the commercials say, to carry you through. Like it's not, it's just not, so that, I'm a diva anyway, so it doesn't matter. But like, I think when clients ask me these questions, it's a little outside of scope because I'm just there for the exercise part of it. But I always encourage add as opposed to take away. So add more fiber or add more vegetables to help with sustaining energy as opposed to taking away I guess I'll have to forego those couple of cookies I may have and then insert random vegetable that I really hate. Like that's, to me, that's setting yourself up for some not success. So those are sort of kind of the things that and of course lots of water, like always drinking lots of water, or I do prefer noon tablets, like anything that's not going to be super sugary, sort of kind of give me some kind of crash and that kind of thing. So.
That ends up being a really good segue for the hydration. Before we get there, so one of the things that Brandon and I talked about were just the lack, just general hydration that not only young athletes have, but those of us that go to the gym or run or whatever, play soccer. There's just a general lack of hydration among adults, but just talking about fuel and some of the things you've heard so far, does anybody have a question? I can walk over with my mic and you can have a question if you want to ask anybody. Panel? Anybody? All right.
Great volunteer.
It just takes the first one, then we get going.
Okay, I'm all for planning ahead, get that. Oh, got really picky eaters. Foods planned, we don't want that. That's really, that just makes me cringe. I don't want that. Now what?
Well, so that's where it becomes very difficult because obviously you can pack and you can plan, but getting picky eaters to eat, and this isn't a great answer, but it's really whatever gets your kids to eat, do that to get them to eat. Picky eaters, I mean, that can be really difficult because I think that's what we see with student athletes a lot, kids in general. They're not eating a lot. They may have access to food. This isn't it's not packed, or they're just not eating it. So, I mean, I have this discussion, so my husband is in elementary education, and he talks about the kids during the day and how certain times with snacks or lunch, it's the same thing. They're just not they just didn't eat that much. But, that's really, I guess, getting down into the depths of, okay, well, what will they actually eat? Are there certain things? It's better to have, some of those choices may not be optimal, but it's better to have some sort of fuel than to not be fueled, especially for kids. So finding what works. It may not always be the perfect choice, but if it gets them to eat, hey, that's the most important thing. So, sorry if that wasn't super helpful, but
No, that's basically what we've been doing.
yeah, well, you're doing great.
On that note, on the same note, on the same note, sometimes hearing it from parents is completely ineffective. So, what are some ways that as parent, I'm a parent, I think there may be educators in the room too, how do we get other adults in their lives to circle around and encourage and support and emphasize nutrition? How do you prove it to them? I guess that's a sports psychology question.
Across the board, probably. So two thoughts come to mind when you ask that. One being, opportunities like this where there are professionals in the room. I know, get my card. I'd be more than happy to pick up a phone call anytime. I'm sure that'd be very similar for everyone else up here. On top of that, what I've found in working with especially younger athletes, in order to get them to value something that maybe a parent is saying, but they need to hear the exact same thing from someone else, you find a role model in that sport. And even if it's not that sport, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's someone who they look up to and have seen be successful and even if it's gives you a little bit of credibility to the message you're sending, then they might now come to you and ask more questions. But that way, they already have people they look up to, too, obviously parents as well. But if you've got another player, whether it's high school, collegiate, who's doing most of the right things and can give a little bit of a piece of advice that's jiving with the message you're trying to send, they're often more receptive to at least the beginning of that kind of conversation. They're still, depending on what age they are, they're still young. So it also takes time, just like anything else, to mature, to be able to understand, okay, well, when I eat good things, I feel better, I do better, I perform better, I am happier. It takes some time for trial and error with that as well. That would be, personal opinion, a couple of suggestions I have.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, so if you have a child in athletics, you can always go up to the coach. I even do it for some of my athletes, their parents, and say, hey, they're not eating before such and such time. Have that coach him or her say, hey, you're looking kind of sluggish. Did you eat anything? And then they say, hey, just make sure you eat so that way you can sustain your practice and you perform better out in the field or court or whatever it may be. Because I always tell my parents when they call me, I was like, I can probably regurgitate everything you're saying to them, but with you it's nagging, and for me it's, oh, he's a professional, he knows what he's talking about. I get that a lot. So whether it's a coach, a teacher, another professional in their sport or not, someone they look up to, something like that with church. If it comes from mom and dad or the guardian, it's nagging, you're getting on the nerves, et cetera, et cetera. It's coming from me, they're going to do it, even if it's the same exact thing. And then the parent gets to say, see, told you so. And so it just kind of confirms the parent a little bit as well. And the gentleman who asked the question in the back, to piggyback off of something they were saying, what I like to do, I've always found that there is something the kids like. So I'll make a whole list, fruits, vegetables, starches, proteins, and make them go through and check everything they like, will eat, or something. And you will find, even if it's just broccoli and just carrots, go with it. Just broccoli, just carrots at every meal with chicken fingers and mashed potatoes, perfect. You're getting something in versus it not being a fruit, not being a vegetable. They will like at least one or two. Some of the other things they say they don't like, but it's because they haven't tried it. So it's introducing them to them. Just last Saturday, I had a lacrosse player, and he didn't like hardly any of the vegetables. But I asked mom and dad who were in the room with us, and I asked him, I said, will you eat spaghetti? Sure. Okay, chop up some bell peppers and broccoli. He or she will never know the difference that it's there. Okay? So it's another way for us to get it in, because they're likely going to eat the spaghetti. They're not going to taste that other stuff, because the marinara sauce is going to mask it. So there's always little ways to get that stuff in there, and to find out what their likes and dislikes are, and just roll with it. Something's better than nothing, as they alluded to earlier.
what would be some good foods to eat the night before a game or a race, just to educate them. Come on,
All right. What sport?
soccer and cross country.
It goes back again to the preference of the kid, but usually a pasta dish of some sort, you're not going to go wrong with, especially if it's the night before. Something like that would be good if they like potatoes, sweet potatoes, chicken breast, something like that will be simple. Now that we're getting into the cold season, it could be like a chili or something like that, and then let them have 1, 2, or 3 rolls that go with it, so that way they're getting a little bit of mostly carbohydrate, some protein, and a little bit of fruit and vegetable, because they're not going to touch those hardly anyways. So we want something that has starch. I mean, it could be a sandwich, but like if they normally eat just a regular turkey sandwich, if it's the night before competition, instead of doing it on bread, maybe do it on a thick bacon. Okay, so now we're taking their carb intake from 30 grams all the way up to about 100 or 60 or something like that. A little bit, higher in carbs, a little bit of protein. If we can get them to eat a fruit or a vegetable, perfect. If not, maybe even 100% fruit juice or something like that. I always say, a lot of people ask those questions, and I always say it's a great question, but it also depends what happens before, earlier in the day. So that way you want to see what they're eating breakfast, lunch, and not just the night before, not just 30 or minutes or an hour before a competition or something like that. I hope that helps.
How about the morning of before breakfast, like the meal before a game, like the day of? Is there anything in particular before a game or before a race?
Particularly with those two sports, if they'll do oatmeal, which most kids won't, but if you jazz it up with blueberries, with honey, with cinnamon, brown sugar, something like that, then they'll usually light into it. Grits, a couple of waffles or pancakes with some eggs would also be great, and then like a fruit bowl or something like that is usually good. A lot of my soccer athletes, high school and collegiate, really love peanut butter and banana sandwich. That and chocolate milk, as long as it's 1 or 2 hours before competition, they're good to go.
We're talking about just the milk aspect, Brandon, I'm going to stay with you just for a second, and get into hydration. So we had alluded to, you were talking about the lack of hydration just in general among athletes, but one of the other things that I really didn't know too much about, I knew it was happening a little bit, was this fascination of caffeine supplements pre-workout. So I'm gonna let you talk about that, and then anybody else in the panel can jump in when it comes to hydration and what you can do leading up, because a lot of times, I mean, you gotta remember hydration too, it's not just what you're drinking, but a lot of it is what you're eating. And it's not just the day before or day of, it's what you're doing 72 hours before, 48 hours before. But I'm gonna let you start this one off. Because I know you can talk for an hour, but I'm gonna cut you off at some point.
You just start with hydration? Okay.
And then the supplement.
Okay. Hydration is probably the first area I tackle with just about every athlete client that I see. In general, my own perception with the clients I work with, most of us probably walk around dehydrated all day, every day. When we sit down and look at it, we're probably not taking in enough fluid, i.e. water, that we need to. And a lot of my athletes do not, especially your teenage athletes, hardly drink anything in the morning. Same thing with their diet regimen we alluded to earlier. They may or may not touch a single thing at lunch. They might have some milk or juice or a little bit of water, and it's usually not until they get onto the field or the court that they really start drinking. And I was telling Joey that I start there, especially when it's relative to performance, because y'all, that's probably the single most important factor, the most immediate thing that makes or breaks an athletic performance, and we just don't think about it. It only takes, a 1% drop in body weight, so 1% decrease in hydration level, for us to start affecting, say, response time, critical thinking skills, decision making, that kind of thing. And then you're looking at a 2 or 3 more pounds, so 2 to 5% decrease or being dehydrated, and then their performance starts to suffer. Their endurance suffers. Their strength suffers. Their ability to last from the beginning of the game to the end of the game just significantly drops. And it always baffles me because water is readily available. There's no reason for us to be walking around dehydrated. And then I was alluding to the fact that, you know, just because we do something, hydration is not, okay, I did it good at breakfast, so that means I'm good to go the rest of the day. You know, being hydrated is an ongoing thing from start to finish. And so it's just one of the areas that I preach on, and to simplify it a little bit with my athletes, I try to establish a schedule. I try to keep it simple. I'm a big fan of that KISS philosophy, keep it simple, stupid. And so I have them start off with 12 to 16 ounces of water or something first thing in the morning. I was like, I don't care, you know, if it needs to be cold, let's refrigerate it. If it can be room temperature, let's keep it at the bedside. As soon as your feet hit the floor, we're drinking, okay? I didn't say that. So even if they're in the restroom, I want them to, before they get down to breakfast, I want at least 12 ounces in. And then at breakfast, we'll have another 20 ounces. At lunch, we do another, 16, 20 ounces. So that way, they have an easy schedule to remember, and it keeps them hydrated. It's not only, if we're talking about high school kids and teens, it's not only going to help their mental acuity during class, but also when they get out there on the field. It's just so easy for it to affect your performance, and they don't realize it just because we don't know, we don't think about it. So it's just a simple pattern, you can develop with your kids or your athletes. Hey, first thing in the morning, 12, 16 ounces, lunch 20 ounces, breakfast 20 ounces, supper 20 ounces. After practice, we usually, if you've got a scale before and after, you can weigh yourself. And for every pound they lose, have them consume at least 20 ounces of water. But if you don't want to go that route, just have them drink, at least 36 ounces as soon as they're done with practice, if it lasts longer than, say, an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Anybody else?
So I think the other thing to consider about all of that is that you know how much water you should be drinking, but sometimes you need an actual physical reminder of it. And what I think really helps is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Swell bottles. They come in a lot of really cool patterns and colors, and I think sometimes if you give your kid a really cool looking water bottle, they'll maybe get excited about using it. So I think just having that physical reminder and something like that will kind of jog their memory to keep hydrating throughout the day. And I always keep my water bottle with me. It's the last thing or the first thing I think of before I go anywhere. So.
Yeah, something with the numbers makes it so much easier for a young athlete because they can just visually see it.
The Mountain bottles are really good because it's a 32-ounce bottle and it has everything marked so you can see how much you're drinking. That's the bottle that, my gosh, I've been carrying this thing around for years, and it just makes it so much easier. And if you always have it, it's that constant reminder, like Elizabeth said. So it's good to have something like that, and then make it fun. And if it's something they like, you're more likely to refill it and drink out of it. So I think that's a good approach.
We have any hydration